And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bench with Bubba, episode 301. We got some baseball news to talk about for your fantasy baseball team, some strategy talk, and much, much more. In order to do so, special guest of the show. He's been on a few times. It's good to have him back with his beautiful, luscious head of hair. You can find us over at Baseball HQ. Mr. Ryan Bloomfield, how we doing, man?
Doing great, Bubba. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, obviously a special occasion when I get a personalized haircut just for the live stream.
Yes.
So you put a lot of work into the prep for this one.
I love it. It's gonna be awesome, and get to know all of us so well this quarantine time.
Oh yeah.
Why don't you everybody know what you guys got going on at Baseball HQ? Though you guys have been kind of getting busy here, getting back into it.
Yeah. We've obviously been, just kind of like everything else. It was that kind of slow few months, and we are full go 0 to 60 in like this past week. So got a lot going on Baseball HQ. That's where you can find my writing. I write a weekly speculator column for this site, and I've been at HQ since 2012. So it's been a while. It's been a great time. Work on the Baseball Forecaster, and then on Twitter you can find me at Ryan BHQ.
2012, outstanding.
Yeah.
That's quite the run there, my friend.
We've had a lot of long timers there. So I had a live stream with like Doug Dennis a couple days ago, and he had been there. He's been there since 1999, and Ray and Brent have been there about 20 years. So it's a lot of long timers. So I'm still kind of one of the young ones out there.
Yeah, but you're moving up that list pretty quickly. That's for darn sure. It's fun to see everybody there. I've talked to most of them. I haven't had all of them on the show yet, but HQ's got quite the crew. I love the guys over there. They're always fun listens on the show and great product. It's one of the handful of websites I do subscribe to. So big fan.
Thank you.
Of HQ and what you guys do. And one of these days, I've said it many times, one of these days I will make it to First Pitch Arizona someday.
Yeah.
It's a tough time of year for me, but I will make it.
It's one of the highlights of my year where you interact with everyone on Twitter. You listen to them on podcasts. Now we see them on live streams, but it's awesome just to meet them in person and get to sit down and watch ball games and talk fantasy. So it's a great time. Unfortunately, this year we are not having First Pitch, Arizona at least, for obvious reasons. I think the spike in really the Phoenix area was kind of the last straw with that one. So we'll be back better than ever in 2021, but also doing First Pitch Florida next spring as well. So kind of sucks, but that's 2020 for you.
Yeah, them's the breaks these days. That's just the way things. Just the way things are going. But exactly. We're gonna start we're gonna talk about some breaks. We have some news coming out, some opt outs, some COVID deals. There's a lot of news that changes every day, like we've been talking about. So some of it we try not to overreact to. Some of it we do what we can with. And we'll start with one of the. It sounds weird saying the biggest impact because they're all impacts to people's health that we're talking about.
Yep.
But David Price opts out of his contract, and I can't blame anybody for opting out if they want to opt out, and that's never the issue. But from a fantasy perspective, doing what we do, we have to analyze the fact this opens up a spot in an already crowded Dodgers rotation. If we want to take it a step further, we found out today Jimmy Nelson's going to have back surgery, so he's another arm kind of out of the way. We've seen news that Ross Stripling's getting stretched out, that Dustin May's getting stretched out. What are you doing with this Dodgers rotation where Kershaw and Bueller are clearly the 1-2, but then there's 3 spots for about 5 or 6 arms?
Yeah, then it gets, exactly. And I mean, that's been the LA problem the last, 5 or 6 years. They're just so deep in the rotation that from a fantasy standpoint, and really, and more so in 2020, and I'll kind of drive this point home throughout the pod tonight, is just kind of, the length of some of these LA starters is just not going to be there for people to get wins and rack up strikeouts. So like Kershaw and Bueller pretty much have, that long leash. They can kind of go 5 to 7, sometimes 8 innings, but the rest of that rotation, the Urias, Stripling, Wood might have a little bit of a longer leash just because of what he's done in the past. But there's a lot of guys with tons of talent. Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin. The talent's there, the ratios will be there, but I can just see another year of Dave Roberts either piggybacking guys or having guys going 4, maybe 5 innings, especially for the first 2-3 weeks of the season. And from a fantasy angle, that's a tough place to mine from in order to get those counting stats, those strikeouts and wins. So I hate to say it, but I'm kind of shying away from that back end of the LA rotation just because I don't think a lot of those guys are going that deep into games until at least September.
And that's the hard part about it. Like you said, it's going to be a theme throughout this and many podcasts coming up till the season starts. There's still so many questions involved. And Kershaw and Bueller, yeah, you can pretty much say they're going to be the 1-2. There's really no arguing that. You're going to imagine Kershaw especially should be good to go for 5+. Bueller will be close. But then Urias, Wood, Stripling, May, Gonsolin, all these guys. And that's why I found it interesting when reports came out the last couple of days. Stripling's almost stretched out to 6 innings. May's almost stretched out to 5. And I'm like, that's good. That's nice and all. But tell us what's that mean? Because I'm with you. We've all been under speculation that, you got Urias and Wood and all these other arms that they're going to piggyback or they're going to do all kinds of goofy things because they have the luxury to do that. So as much as I want to jump, I'm a huge Dustin May fan. I love Dustin May in season, like the full season when we were drafting, thinking he'd get his shot eventually. I'm still intrigued by him. I'm excited at the fact he stretched out. Question is, what are they going to do with that? And that's where we have to still kind of keep our ears to the beat and find out what the beat writers are talking about in that regard. Because eventually you could find gold in one of these and get a super cheap value.
I think the one of the major things that's going to decide leagues this year is getting those cheap starters and just finding the ones that are going to be able to get wins and get strikeouts in volume. That's going to be huge. But yeah, I'm with you. And especially like it's been kind of weird. All the reports lately of pitchers stretching out. There's kind of, I don't know. I'm skeptical because there's a difference between going 5 or 6 innings in a simulated game, a pretty low stress innings on your arm, between that and actually going in there with, runners on base in a 60 game sprint. Those are high stress innings. And I don't think we can totally translate the reports of someone threw 85 pitches in a simulated game and just assume that they're going to be that good out of the gate. We'll see. I might be wrong, but it's kind of funny how so many reports, it all started out that there were like 2 or 3, inning starts for the first couple weeks and then they'd ramp up. And now it's all these guys, pitching complete games and simulated innings.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And that's one thing like Nick Pollock and I talked about last episode is it's not necessarily the innings, it's the stress in those innings, like for those pitches that we have to decide, like you're saying. And that's why like a beat writer today said Jordan Lyles went 3 1/3 and gave up, 4 runs or whatever. And I didn't care about the stats. I literally asked, how many pitches did he throw? Like, that's what I want to know. That's the workload I'm curious about because, Kershaw, if he's efficient, he could be through 5 innings at like 65 pitches. And Dave Roberts will throw him back out there. It's just little things like that. So it's a guessing game. That's where we're at right now, the fun of it all. Let's talk New York Yankees. This is one that makes me laugh because reports like 2 weeks ago, before there was a deal in place, Stanton wasn't healthy. Judge had a collapsed lung that he's recovering from. Things look bleak. Now they're practicing. They were in the I'm literally the MLB Network's re-showing the Yankees simulated game of Judges in the batter's box right now. So they were playing today. Does this change your opinion on them if you were off of them? Like, what are you doing with them in drafts right now?
I mean, I think if anything, the price is just going to go up with Judge and Stanton, especially as the sleeveless shirt picks come out of Stanton and Judge standing in the outfield or flexing in the box. That's going to correlate to their ADP going through the roof, I think, in the July draft. So I'm still staying away from those guys. I think there's a big difference between being kind of currently healthy and still being injury prone. And I really do think Judge and Stanton have earned that injury prone tag just because we're waiting 2 or 3 extra months and they say they're 100% right now. Just the track record, especially like the soft tissue stuff, it's there, it's real. Stanton's had some unlucky injuries in the past as well, but I can't trust those guys, especially in a short season where every game's going to matter. Like if you miss even a couple of games and take those zeros in a 60 gamer, that's going to probably crush you in that last day of the season because there's going to be a lot of games won or a lot of leagues won. By a run, RBI here or there, or 2 homers or whatever. So I'm staying away from Judge and Stanton just because the injury risk is still there, even though they look pretty jacked right now.
Yeah, they look healthy as can be, but a lot of people look things like they say don't judge a book by its cover, I believe was the term. Giancarlo Stanton's going around average pick 66 in the RotoWire Online Championship since the return to draft season, as high as 55. Judge is going around pick 71, as high as 48. It's one of those deals like if you're looking just for a power bat, like Soler, Franmil, Schwarber, those are guys I might sleep a little better at going with them later on. Another guy.
Just one other thing on those guys. I mean, just the profile too. They kind of the mid batting average, all power, not many steals. Like there's not much to fall back on if there's an injury or if there's just a dry spell in power. So that profile of player is also one in the early rounds that I don't know. It's not for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Speaking, we'll stick with the Yankees here for a minute. Aaron Hicks, he's one of those guys that when he's healthy, he can produce. It's maybe not so much in a sprint season, but how do we know? But he's back. He was also playing today. He should start pretty much every day in the outfield for the Yankees, barring another flare-up of the injury. And he's going around pick 324 right now in online drafts. Is there any interest in a guy like Aaron Hicks for you?
See, I'm glad you brought up ADP at the end because, there's different, it's just the way that I draft. Like I have different approaches to risk depending on where I'm at in the draft. And like at a 300 plus ADP, that's probably going to go up if Aaron Hicks stays healthy throughout July and the reports are good. But even like 250 plus, yeah, I'm going to kind of lower that risk lever a little bit, that injury risk lever, and take some guys with that ceiling where if they stay healthy, it could really pay dividends. Not willing to do that where the Judges and the Stantons are going, but for Aaron Hicks, I think the injury risk is still real with him. Like he's not suddenly a pillar of fantastic health, but he's not going to cost you much. So if he does get hurt, you kind of toss him back in, and you're churning schedule wise your hitters for the next week. So not really too much to lose with Aaron Hicks. And if he somehow does stay healthy in the 60 gamer, there's a lot of profit at a 250, 300 ADP.
Yeah, there's a lot of profit when you think about it. We talk about the Twins as an offense and certain teams at offenses. Obviously, the Yankees is going to be very strong. So if you can get a cheap piece of that offense, it's always nice. And we've seen in the past where somehow, Hicks will be hitting towards the top of the order in front of the table setters. Like they move him around a lot in that order. So we'll have to see. It is an interesting injury he's coming back from, but would be a nice plus as well. Sticking with the Yankees, one more thing with Minnie saw the video in batting practice where Tanaka took a line drive from Stanton, found out 113-mile-an-hour line drive. That is terrifying to think about.
Was it that fast? God.
That's what the reports came out because the Yankees did what I was hoping teams would do and have the StatCast data on. Didn't think I'd need it for that, but that's what we found, 113-mile-an-hour. He's got a mild concussion. Reports today he's already on a stationary bike, staying loose. I think it's crazy, but he's in concussion protocol. I'm guessing he doesn't throw for a week or so. I'm not a doctor, but I wasn't the biggest Tanaka fan entering draft season. He's going around pick 229. If he's getting a late start, he might miss a start or so. What are your feelings on Tanaka right now?
Yeah, it's obviously unfortunate first and foremost. Like a mild concussion is almost a misnomer. Like that's pretty serious stuff. Even if he's already, exercising on a bike. It's definitely concerning at 113 miles an hour. Fantasy wise for Tanaka, that definitely hurts just because you're missing a week plus of ramp up time. So what is that going to mean? Even if Tanaka is cleared to go for opening day or opening week, how many innings is his arm going to be really ready for? The other thing with Tanaka, I was interested in him earlier this spring. He really blamed kind of the ineffectiveness of a split finger fastball last year on the ball with the seams, and his kind of outlook on 2020 for me depended on what kind of ball we would see this season. And we still don't really know the answer to that question, but I'm thinking if Major League Baseball is trying to rev up interest in a short season and take advantage of the 1 week, I guess they have of being the main sport as opposed to a month, but that's a different conversation. They are, I think they're more apt to kind of keep last year's ball, and Tanaka did not like last year's ball. Couldn't grip that splitter, and the effectiveness went way down. So even injury aside, I was kind of out on him in a shorter season, and this, the concussion obviously adds to that risk. So I think his ADP will drop, but he's definitely dropping down in my ranks until we know more about his not just recovery, but how many pitches he's going kind of closer to the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I already had him pretty down in my ranks to begin with. I was going to lower him some more with this news. I liked him more in a long season. The short season just gives me concerns because Tanaka's going to have a couple of games where that split he's not splitting and he's just giving a batting practice. And that's going to be really tough during the season. So I'll probably be passing on him as well. Where he's going in drafts right now, and I imagine he's going to fall a little bit, but he's got like Stripling and other guys we talked about right around him that if you're going to take the risk at that point, you might have someone else to look at. let's go to Joey Gallo here. Reports came out today that he tested positive for COVID. Now we found out that might mean 4 days because he had it for 2 weeks already. Lots of things to check here, but let's say it's like the Freddie Freeman scenario where he's going to miss about a week or so, it looks like, all things considered. And, you know, he is a big power hitter. You have to imagine he's going to be able to step back in and hit. If for some reason, like, are you dropping Gallo in your rankings? I know a lot of people talked about, you know, guys that are getting getting the disease, they're knocking down 10 to 15%. Are you knocking Gallo back at all?
I think that general like 10 to 15% thing is a good kind of baseline to start. And then I think you just kind of look case by case as to how each person reacts to the virus. And it does sound like Gallo is asymptomatic and feeling fine, which can't be a bad thing. So maybe it's not that big of a deal right now. We still just, I don't know. There's so much we don't know about the virus. Like, yeah, he could still test positive 2 weeks from now and, you know, still be asymptomatic, but he can't come back until he has those 2 negative tests in a row. So it's kind of, for me, it's a wait and see. I'm not really drafting right now. Probably I'm pretty much holding off all my drafts until the last week of summer camp. And I think that's a good move just because the news is just going crazy right now. So I'm kind of waiting to see on Gallo if, you know, the asymptomatic thing is nice. So if he does, you know, test negative and gets back into it, like I don't think he would drop that far or should drop that far in your rankings. I'm not a big Gallo guy. To Gallo Gal. I don't know if Pollock's in here or not with Zach Gallen, but not really a Gallo guy just because of the profile. Like I said before with Judge and Stanton, like it's not really a profile I'm looking to target even in the mid round. So he's probably off my board, but if you're on Gallo, I wouldn't really drop him yet. Just wait and see the next week or so and see how he does.
Yeah, I'd wait and see for sure because, like I said, with him, we know he's been taking batting practice. If they have to DH him to let him get that back, that's fine. He's going to be able to hit the ball at the ballpark. Right. I'm not too worried about him. You mentioned the asymptomatic. Everyone's a different case, but we've seen with a lot of NBA players and these guys because they are great athletes, it literally barely affects them at all. Like they're like bouncing back the second they can pass a test. So we'll have to wait and see with some of these. Like other guys we'll talk about are a little different. But we'll start with the Braves pitching before we get to Freddie Freeman. We'll go to the Atlanta Braves, and King Felix opts out of his contract, or out of this season, which I think actually opts him out of his contract with the Braves. And he was kind of scheduled to be the 5th starter in a rotation that featured Soroka and Fried and Fulte and Hamels. And there's a lot of mixed reviews on some guys there. The young kids people love. The other ones are kind of questionable. But now there's that 5th spot. There's Kyle Wright, who many have liked. There's Sean Newcomb and other options that might pop up. Do you have any interest in any of these 5th starters for the Braves, and just what's your overall thoughts on their rotation?
Yeah, I mean, first off, what a weird way for Felix to end. Maybe not his career, but just a weird way to go out as just kind of opting out in 2020 with Atlanta. It's like, man, that's extremely random. Like probably 10, 15 years from now, you know, I think there's a few Twitter accounts out there that show like celebrities or famous athletes in other jerseys, like Patrick Ewing on the Sonics and stuff like that. Probably see Felix in a spring training Braves jersey at some point.
It'd be crazy.
Yeah. Kind of sucks how that ends. But in terms of like the Braves 5th starter, there's a lot of like young talent in the rotation that they could bring in to replace Felix. And again, I don't know in a 60 gamer like how normally young talent, that's a positive, right? I just don't know with like Bryce Wilson, Sean Newcomb, Kyle Wright, even like Ian Anderson. You got a lot of names for maybe one spot, depending on how Cole Hamels looks in summer camp, and how is Atlanta going to play that? Are they, whoever they pick or whoever wins that rotation spot, is that youngster going to go 5 or 6 out of the gate? I highly doubt it. I think Atlanta's going to take almost like a tandem or like combo spot with that 5th spot in the rotation. Whoever wins it, I don't see them just going out there and throwing 5-6 to start out. So I'm kind of shying away from it until we know A, who wins the job, and B, like what the outlook is for that winner, because I could definitely see like a tandem there, and that gets you your kind of 2 or 3 innings, maybe 4 innings of decent ratios and a few strikeouts, but that's not really all that valuable in fantasy in a short sprint.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I know a lot of people want to see Kyle Wright. We've seen how good he was in college. That was only a couple years ago, and we've seen him pitch well in the minors. He has a little cup of coffee in the bigs, didn't pan out well, but We've seen that happen to a lot of players, especially pitchers, from time to time. Newcomb, he had his moments last year, but he seemed to be more effective in the bullpen. So it'll be real interesting to see how they play that out. I could definitely see the piggyback. Cole Hamels have an important part of that decision as well, because Soroka, Fried, and Fulte, they're locked in to do their thing, it looks like, and they'll go from there.
Just real quick with Kyle Wright, like that's the perfect example of someone who, pretty good prospect pedigree. A lot of smart guys like him. A lot of scouts have a lot of really good things to say about Kyle Wright. You just don't know how they're going to do in the rotation when they start out. So Kyle Wright last year had 20 innings of an 8.69 ERA and a 188 WHIP. Like in a short season, that's just going to nuke your ratios. And you got to try to avoid those landmines like that. And prospects who haven't seen major league hitting like this, there's a pretty big risk of some really ugly ratios, and you just don't have enough time to recover from it in 2 months.
Yeah, I just opened up his Fangraphs page, and I'm no scout or prospect analyst by any means, but all the love we have for Mitch Keller, Kyle Wright's page looks very familiar. So I'm just going to throw that out there. If you look at the difference between their big league and their minor league stint, Keller was a little better in AAA than Wright was, but a lot of similarities there. That'll make you wonder. When we're talking about the hitting side of things, though, we all know Freddie Freeman. He contracted COVID. He's actually apparently dealing with some symptoms. So he's one that I'm really curious on how quickly he comes back. From all things we've heard, obviously we haven't heard everything, but you look at roster resource, they have Yonder Alonso predicted to potentially play first. There's a lot of talk about Austin Riley moving to first, maybe Marcelo Zuna DHing. Nick Markakis opted out today, so that opens up another spot in the outfield. There's a lot of moving pieces in this Braves lineup. Is there anybody that all of a sudden maybe gains some value, like Ender and CRT, Riley, somebody else with their lineup?
Yeah, so a couple things. I'll start with, outfield. I definitely think this is really good for Ender Inciarte. Inciarte still, he's coming off a pretty bad season that was pretty injury marred. He had that back injury and a hamstring injury and only had 199 at bats, hit 246. Like pretty much a lost season for Ender Inciarte. He's still at just his age 29 season, and Inciarte has a track record of hitting pretty much 300. With 20 plus bags over obviously a full season. And that would be plenty valuable in a short sprint when steals are going to be so bunched up by the end of the season. So I think Ender Inciarte, if he does get the playing time, and I think he will surpass the other name I'm kind of looking at is like a Duvall, like you said, or Christian Pash. I think it's Pash, pronounced Pash, but Inciarte is a major target if that playing time opens up, which I think it will. And the contact skills are there. The line drive rate's really good. The speed is still there, again, under 30. So like, I think there's some stolen base upside in there with Inciarte. I saw a tweet earlier, Bubba, you were looking at Pash as well.
Yeah, I'm curious about him. Like, I'm not jumping. Like, Inciarte is obviously much more valuable at this point in time. He should, on paper, have the job. It makes so much sense for Ozuna to play DH. We've seen that defense, the beautiful gifts of the ball off his head and all kinds of goofy stuff. So I'm all for that. Roster Resource has Inciarte batting fifth. Not sure that's where he'll be, but that would be outstanding if that's true. And I'm with you that the speed is there. He's kind of sneaky speed, and people forget about him. I think there's a lot to like there. I think it opens a door for a possible Pash moment. He's on the taxi squad or whatever, the deeper player pool that they're talking about. He's basically free in drafts. I doubt he hasn't even been picked yet. And in the 8 RotoWire online so far, Riley's going to pick 338 or not. No, Inciarte's going to pick 338 right now. And Riley's going at 265. So like Inciarte at 338 seems like such a gift. Obviously you'd imagine that's going up.
Yeah, that'll go up a little bit for sure, but
it probably doesn't go much past 300. I wouldn't think it goes too crazy because it seems like so many people aren't in love with them unless everyone starts preaching it. We'll see. But I'm with you. I think Inciarte is interesting.
The other interesting kind of fallout here, and obviously we hope Freddie Freeman recovers and can get out there as soon as possible, is Travis d'Arnaud. So he spent a good amount of time. I think he actually qualifies at catcher and first base. I don't know if Atlanta will use d'Arnaud at first base and if Freeman's hurt, but there could be, especially in like a 2-catcher league. I mean, all our NFBC leagues are 2-catcher leagues. Anytime you get a catcher who can play another position, as even just, they get that extra game or two every week, just by being flexible defensively, or even filling in a DH. Like d'Arnaud could get enough additional at bats that makes him actually pretty valuable in a 2-catcher league. So that's something I've got my eye on as well, just to see if Atlanta is at least open to trying Travis d'Arnaud at first. That would be a nice little boost.
It's a very good idea because he's already got first base eligibility on an FBC. He's catcher first base already. He's going to pick 276-ish, give or take. So 18th catcher off the board. It's a valid point. Like before I've never been a Buster Posey guy in drafts, which is surprises many. But he doesn't really do it from a fantasy perspective. But I was thinking this year with the DH, him playing first base was interesting. But now he might not even play. So we'll see about that. But the Travis d'Arnaud thing, I wanted nothing to do with him for the most part because the Braves are so good about platooning catchers. Tyler Flowers is still there. He's a very good catcher still and a decent offensive catcher. And they're so good at like 60-40, 50-50 splits almost with their catchers. It worried me about d'Arnaud. But if he can go play first base like you're saying, that becomes a whole other ballgame. So that's definitely something to watch. There was rumors about Riley playing first base also. So there's a lot of moving pieces there, but if d'Arnaud could, catch and play first base and play, say, 45 plus games at catcher, that could be tremendous. So that could be sneaky nice. I'm with you there.
And playing time is going to be king in this short season. Like the more at bats you can rack up from any position on your roster. Great point about platoons as well. In general, maybe staying away from those because that obviously hurts that motion.
Yep, no doubt about it. Let's go to the Mets. Everyone loves talking about the Mets. It's always fun to talk about the Mets. And it really stinks because, going into like January, February, it was all about the Edwin Diaz bounce back time. He had a couple rough outings, but the stuff was great, all these things. Let's get back on Edwin Diaz. And now Rojas is already coming out and saying, I'm not 100% sold on we're not going to committee this thing. And I know it's still early and it's hearsay, but he was a top 5 to 8 reliever on a lot of people's boards.
Yeah. Yep.
This could change things. What's your thoughts on Edwin Diaz maybe not being the full-time guy?
It would destroy his value. I mean, that would be rough. Like I thought, for as bad as Edwin Diaz was last year, like you were right, Bubba. Like the price, the market is pretty much expecting not a total full rebound. I mean, he was the number 1 closer in 2018, but pretty damn close. So yeah, this would obviously hurt. I'm not putting too much stock in it yet. I think almost every manager who doesn't have that bona fide established closer at some point during camp says this type of thing, especially early. So I'm not too concerned with it yet, but obviously we'll be watching that. I just don't see like other options in the Mets bullpen. I mean, obviously you have Seth Lugo, but New York really likes to use Lugo in a multiple inning high leverage thing. So I don't think they would move him to closer. I think even if it is a committee, like Diaz would be the kind of the go-to option. So I'm not too worried about it yet, but let's see. You never know with a new manager. I mean, that's why we pull our hair out, or what we have left of our hair, with closers in fantasy, because you're just at the whims of the manager. But keeping my eye on it, but not too concerned yet. Let's see how it develops these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm with you on Lugo. He seems more like the long man, fireman type role for them. The guys that could be interesting is, they had former closer Juris Familia there. I don't think he'd be a threat. You never know. Justin Wilson's a lefty specialist. That could get interesting. And then they signed Dylan Betances. Yep. That's always we've always thought he should be a closer. Is this the time? So we'll have to wait and see there.
It brings back bad memories, man. Waiting for Betances to be the Yankees closer for about 5 or 6 years in a row there.
What should have been. So many things in there. Let's go to St. Louis now. Giovanni Gallegos has COVID as well. The pitchers I'm more worried about than the hitters when it comes, because they need those reps, getting their arm ready. Closers, obviously not nearly as much as starters, but there's a chance he's going to miss some time to get ramped up. The closer situation's already in flux as Jordan Hicks is not ready. John Brebbia is not ready. So now you're looking at the likes of like Hazley and I've heard Andrew Miller's name again, who we almost forgot about for a while. Alex Reyes is there. Who would you be looking at, or are you just staying away from St. Louis?
Staying away, especially in a short season. Like I'm looking for, and I'm really trying to target 2+ teams with an established closer. There's just not enough time to kind of mess around with any kind of committee type thing in drafts, really, until it's kind of late in the draft, 20+ rounds. But if you're spending any kind of draft capital on a closer in this season, it's got to be someone who has a firm grip on the job. There's maybe only like 8 to 10 closers like that, I think, right now in the majors. St. Louis is definitely not one of them. I just don't think in a 162 gamer, there's some time for the most skilled guys to kind of rise to the crop. But in a 60 sprint, like, we're so much even more at the whims of a manager, and anybody can get hot. So if there's not a bona fide closer or role in a bullpen, I'm pretty much staying away unless it's late. So St. Louis, I thought Gallegos might be the guy, especially when you heard about the stuff with Carlos Martinez, but obviously this changes that. So it's in a void for me pretty much until the end game.
Yeah, I was having trouble even buying into St. Louis in February. So because they had so many moving parts there. So this makes it easier for me just to move on. Like you said, saves, bats, all those things are so important. It's tough to play that game. Philadelphia, Zack Wheeler, he's been very adamant that, in the birth of his child, he said he's going to miss likely 2 starts, which now we're knocking him down to 8 or 9 total, if that's the way things work out, give or take. That's assuming he'll be ready when he comes back right away to go full go. Maybe he has to ramp up again real quick. There was rumors he might not play, but he's pretty much said, no, he plans on coming back after the birth of his child. He's going to pick 148 right now. And that is going to be a little early for a guy not going every day. How far would he have to fall down for you to take a chance on him?
Probably pretty far, probably closer to 200 or outside 200, because you just do the math. Like in a 60 gamer, you're getting maybe 10 to 12 starts. You're missing, like you said, if you miss 2 starts, you're down to 8 to 10. What is that ramp up time for a pitcher? I think that has to be included in kind of your return estimate. So you go from 8 to 10 down to like 6 to 8, and maybe 5 or 6 ultimately by the time he's actually full going 5-6 innings and qualifying for wins. So once you're down to that like handful of starts, how many does he win out of those 5 to 6? Like, that number just keeps going down and down and down, and he might only get a couple wins all season. So Wheeler actually really kind of I like the profile of Wheeler. He's pretty recently has been durable and avoiding kind of disasters, which I like a lot in a short gamer, but there's just not enough volume for Wheeler for me to be able to get him. And especially in leagues like with NFBC leagues here, you're drafting Zack Wheeler and then you're doing nothing with him for a week or two. Like, that's really going to be hard once you start setting weekly lineups and you're trying to maximize at-bats and innings on both sides to have a roster spot that's pretty much dead for a couple weeks. So Wheeler would have to be going real late in drafts for me to even contemplate taking him.
Yeah, it's tough. It's real tough. I was a big Wheeler fan as well coming into the season, pitching with Real Muto, getting away from, having a real catcher basically was going to help him a ton. So I was a fan of it. It's going to be next to impossible for me to draft him unless he falls big time. Talking about another player that's going to be having a child, and there's a lot of questions around him, and I know everyone's been asked it, so I'm going to ask you anyways. What are you doing with Mike Trout?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. So it's actually kind of interesting. So at HQ, we ran our Playing Time Today column, and not just to do a subtle plug here, but basically what we do in Playing Time Today is basically every day we go through news items that come through like a RotoWire style. The next day we give kind of the fantasy impact, but then we actually adjust the playing time projection that day, and it updates in our projections for the next day, and you can actually see the impact of somebody losing or gaining playing time and what that does for ultimately is dollar value in your league. So today or yesterday we updated the Trout projection, and Jock Thompson, who is our Angels beat writer, he knows the Angels in and out, has been a season ticket holder for a long time. I think Artie Moreno got the best of him, and he dropped his season tickets the last couple of years, but he's pretty plugged into that. I don't blame him. He's pretty plugged into that organization. And Jock, he docked Mike Trout's playing time 20%. He firmly believes that Trout is going to miss like a quarter of the season. So he did that yesterday and dropped Trout's playing time that much. And so I ran the numbers this morning because our projections updated last night. Trout's like the 27th hitter off the board with like 70-75% playing time. So for me, if I'm following that data, I'm following that projection, there's no way I'm going to get Mike Trout, because that's probably what, 4th or 5th round. And that it's just kind of crazy when you actually run the valuation behind a what if like that. And again, Jock's pretty spot on with the Angels. That value is just not there. And yes, you have to factor in, kind of replacement level playing time and stuff like that. But if you're missing Trout for that long, again, hogging a roster spot, and he's not lasting to the 4th or 5th, but that's kind of where we have him valued right now.
Yeah, and that's the conundrum here, because I'm a firm believer he's going to miss probably a couple days while it happens. There's going to be some process. Like at the best case scenario, he's back in like 5 or 6 days. That's the best case scenario.
Best case.
Yeah. In reality, it's probably 2 weeks or so, 20%, like you're saying. And that's just a detriment, because I've done a mock draft and he went like 5th or 6th. I've seen, I think, Jeff Erickson leagues, he went 4th or 5th. Some other NFBC drafts that have been posted out there. I've seen him fall, I think, actually to 7 or 8 and some. Like people are starting to just let him free fall. I'm curious if we get a more defined answer, like what your drafts like on the 21st, 22nd look like when it comes to Mike Trout, because did you say he was the 24th hitter or outfielder on your board?
Hitter.
Yeah, okay.
Hitter. Yep.
Okay, because I was looking at outfielders, like, oh man, that really drops him down. But
I didn't drop him that much, but he dropped a ton. I think, like, I don't know. I mean, Trout seems genuinely concerned about opting in for this season, and again, I don't blame him at all. I just don't think we're going to have that resolution by the time we get to drafts, even by opening day. Baby's not due till August, so I mean, there's a real chance that kind of the longer that goes, what if it's mid-August and there's only 5 weeks left of the season, and you just kind of say it's too risky, people are testing positive, and I'm not going to come back for these last 5 weeks. I mean, there's a very real possibility of that happening. So
there's a real possibility.
Get late first round and he misses 5 games. I mean, that's the upshot, but there's a lot of risk there, and then the first round.
There's a real possibility, and this is crazy to think about, a first round pick. You play him for like 5 weeks or whatever, and then you just drop him, because if he disappears, which is insane, the idea of dropping Mike Trout is ridiculous. But if he's gone for 2 to 3 weeks and you're trying to make a push to the end, you can't afford, like, it's one of those situations that you have to have that backup plan in place. That's going to be, I don't think I'm going to want to stomach that.
That's really rough. And we were actually talking about something similar, not Trout specifically, but we were talking about this the other night on the HQ live stream. Like, it's easy to talk about kind of churning your roster and dropping kind of the last couple hitters from your roster every week and replacing them with guys with good platoon matchups or whatever. But in a 60 gamer, like, what if your 5th round pick starts off in a month-long slump?
Yep.
Like, I mean, do you think about dropping that guy? The drop decisions, I think, in a short sprint are going to be very difficult, because there's going to be guys who start out slow. I mean, it just happens. That's statistics, and a lot of those guys are going to be early rounders. So how long do you give them leash-wise before you think about cutting bait? I don't have the right answer. It was just interesting, and it came up.
No, I've had that question for a lot of guests. I said, like, especially guys that rely on, say, StatCast, watching velocity changes or these different things. I said, you don't have that luxury anymore. So how do you know when to pull the pin? Like, it's going to be one of those deals. Whoever can, I know it sounds simple and, it's like no duh, Bubba, but whoever can make those decisions the right way quick enough are obviously the ones that are going to be ahead of it. But you know how it is. You get attached to a certain guy you picked early on. It's tough to just, in your head, you're like, oh, he'll bounce back. But now it's a 60-game season, so can we afford that?
Yeah. And I mean, the odds are he will bounce back, but maybe it's like a Jose Ramirez thing, who just really sucked for 3 months, and that's the whole season. Like, you would have been better by dropping him a month in. So yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Let's go to the Colorado Rockies here. Charlie Blackmon's still at his house in, I believe, Georgia, where he's waiting to come back to the Rockies. They still haven't they haven't put him on the IL or anything, so they expect him to be there. But also they have David Dahl potentially leading off. I know Dahl's always a conundrum because he can't stay healthy, but he's going to pick 139. Does that have any intrigue to you to have the leadoff batter for the Rockies at pick 139?
It actually does. It kind of goes against what I was saying earlier, but Dahl's going a little bit later. I mean, not an early round foundational pick. I actually took Dahl in labor mix back in February, which seems like a year ago. But I kind of feel like even with Blackmon in the fold, I think Dahl with NLDH is going to find enough time, even if it's not just DH, but that just opens up an extra spot. And I kind of feel like if Dahl is a hitter's healthy right now, like there's just less time for him to get hurt. And I kind of feel that way in general, more just about the hitters, because they don't have to like kind of quote unquote ramp up like a pitcher does. So I do kind of feel like Dahl is worth taking that shot in the mid round, especially like the park factors for Colorado are going to be real nice because you miss out on, the snowed out games or the 38-degree games in early April. You're getting Coors like at its pristine location and time of year. So ball's going to fly. I think Dahl's going to play a good amount. And yeah, I'm willing at that point in the draft, willing to start taking some risks once I've built that foundation. And Dahl's a piece who could, especially like he's so balanced. I mean, he could do that 5 category production thing from the middle rounds. And that's invaluable. Obviously there's some risk there, but I am kind of in on Dahl, and that's not a normal, Bloomfield strategy, but whatever, got that gut feeling.
There you go. I like Dahl a lot. It's just the health is a thing, but leading off, he's healthy right now. You mentioned he can help you in all 5 categories. He's kind of a poor man's Starling Marte, kind of, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And you get him a lot later, so I can definitely get on board with that. That's intriguing.
Yeah. And leadoff in the NL this year is going to be awesome because you obviously don't have that DH who either just made it out right in front of you, or that's obviously going to be a legit hitter. He's going to be on base, so it's actually going to help RBIs a lot more than I think we think just from a leadoff hitter. So yeah, I'm
with you there. Let's talk about you. You've been having some fun there with Baseball HQ. You had 3 nights last week, ramping things up and doing live streams and all kinds of cool stuff. Why don't you let everybody know what you guys kind of did to get everybody ready for that 60-game sprint we have coming up?
Yeah, this was fun. And talking with Raymond Hershey, the coach of the site, we were looking for a way to get as many perspectives from the HQ staff as we could in terms of kind of just strategies, throw out as much info as we can and different opinions, and have the reader kind of the subscriber make those decisions kind of for themselves. So last week we did a staff roundtable, and we've got roughly, I think, 40-ish writers on staff, and about 25 of them took part in the roundtable, and we just did all things short season strategy. So we started with, on Tuesday, we did rule changes to consider for your league, kind of a more like commish aspect to the short season, prospects, starting pitchers, advice for leagues that have already drafted, closers, and then just any other kind of draft prep considerations. And ended up being like 7,000 words, and we capped it off with a live stream. It's just really fun to get different opinions out there. You do kind of get that a little bit of groupthink, but there are some definite contrarian plays, especially as it comes to starting pitching, that came out as a result of that roundtable. It was fun to do.
Yeah, it's fun with all the different philosophies right now that I've said it many times. There's so many different ways to attack this season, and who's to say who's wrong right now? Like, it's absolutely crazy.
Exactly.
You mentioned some of those starting pitcher philosophies and whatnot, and you got a recent article or a future article coming up here talking about guys ramping up, needing more time, needing less. Like, you don't have to let the whole cat out of the bag right now, but what's some of the things you're seeing out there?
Yeah, so kind of the main purpose of the article is, going back to the roundtable, we had probably the majority of our staff said, essentially get your ace or 2 early. Those are the more reliable guys, not going to blow up your ratios and might qualify for more wins and get more strikeouts than your mid-tier pitchers. We also had a kind of a subset of staffers that said kind of punt starting pitching, not totally punt, but wait till the mid rounds and stock up, 5, 6, 7, 8 hitters in a row and then go from there. So what I'm working on right now for HQ is, if you go that early ace route, which pitchers are just more or less likely to ramp up quickly, because I think that's going to be the difference in a lot of leagues. Like, I think a lot of leagues are going to come down to 5 or 10 strikeouts or a win or 2 on the pitching side. And the earlier you can have starting pitchers who qualify and get wins, that's a big competitive advantage. So I'm looking at a number of different factors in this week's speculator to just kind of take a stab and guess at which pitchers going early in drafts are worth the investment, because they probably won't take as long to ramp up, and which ones aren't. So it's an interesting little exercise, and got some interesting names as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because that's going to be very important to see who's ready out the gate. I know we already talked about some guys are 5 innings here. What are the pitch counts? That's going to be a very valuable thing because if guys are making 11 or 12 starts and we have to waste a couple of starts on not even getting full 5 innings to qualify for a win, that's a pretty big deal. So that'll be interesting to see there, and without blowing up the ratios at the same time. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how all that comes along. But let's take some listener questions here because we got some doozies. Let's just put it that way. And usually the doozies start with the Ain't Eating, so let's start with them. He's got 2 questions for you, Ryan. Have you gotten a haircut since quarantine started?
I think we answered that one already. My wife cut the hair Friday night. I told her to go high, and it's high. It's a little uneven too, but whatever. I don't really leave the house. I work from home, and worst case on the day job, the professional side, I throw that hat on, and I'm good to go. I look clean cut from here down. So Yancey, to answer your question, we did a preliminary cut probably about a month ago, and then we kind of went all in with this thing, whatever it's called.
the
I think it has a name. Yeah, just quarantine cut.
The quarantine cut. Yancey's other question for you, because he knows you've been quarantined up there, staying safe. He says, "Where's the first place you're going to go once it's completely safe?"
Let's see. That's a tough one. I would say golfing, but I did sneak out and play around this past weekend, so wouldn't be that. Probably would be either just a bar or a baseball game or both.
Yeah.
Either head up to Safeco or I guess T-Mobile now, if I could, and go check that out. Would be awesome to be up there like opening day and checking it all out. So yeah, I'd go see a baseball game, or if it's in the fall, college football game, maybe go see the home state Oregon Ducks, see how they do against an Ohio State team coming to Eugene in September. But that would be awesome, but probably not going to happen.
Yeah, that'd be outstanding. But yeah, dang, that's going to be either an empty house or not going to happen. So
yeah, no, it would be a sporting event for sure.
Yeah, I respect that. 'Cause that's what I even told my wife the other day. We were driving back from somewhere, and the radio was on, and we drove by a billboard. We're supposed to have our Mid-State Fair down here where they have concerts every night. It's supposed to start in July. It's a really fun time, and it's obviously canceled. And I told her, I was like, next year the little one will be almost a year. Grandma can watch her. We can go to a concert. How much fun is a concert going to be once we can actually all get out of the house and do something again? Like just little things that we took for granted for so long. I was like,
for sure. And yeah, I was going to take, I guess my son would have been almost 1, but we had a trip planned to go to Denver and go see the Rockies. And obviously that got all jacked. So
yeah, well, when he's 2. We'll get to do
when
that.
he's 2. There's
there
time.
You go. Lucas Beery asks at BeeryPlox33, what are some different strategies or ideas that you implement when building a 12-team roster versus a 15-team roster? It's a good question because I don't think a lot of people really think about it too much.
Yeah, and I think too, like, I don't know, and I probably should preface a lot of the kind of analysis and stuff that I make is I mostly play 15-team leagues for NFBC, and that's one of the kind of tougher things analyzing the game is there's just so many different formats out there. A 15 and a 12, I think the biggest thing I would actually be a little bit more willing to embrace risk in a 12-teamer just because the replacement level is so high that there's always pretty decent options on the waiver wire, not just for just skill wise, but you just have so many more options available to you to kind of churn and burn hitters. There's pretty legitimate hitting talent in a 12-teamer that is not there in a 15-team league. And you notice that if you do NFBC, like the RotoWire Online Championship versus like a main event, that fab pool is pretty strong every week in a 12-teamer. So that's probably the biggest thing is I take more risks in a 12-teamer just because if it doesn't pan out, the replacement level is that much higher that, it doesn't hurt as bad and you get that reward if the risk does pan out. And then I basically take that approach even further. Like I'm in the Tout Wars AL only with 12-team AL only. And it's like, there's actually like not even enough bodies on the hitting side. If someone gets hurt or goes out, like you're basically taking a zero because the player pool is not deep enough to even get guys who play. So as the league gets deeper and deeper, I kind of coil up risk wise and try and spread that risk and get guys who I think are going to produce, as opposed to taking like a Judge or Stanton floor ceiling type guy in a 12-teamer. That makes sense.
No, that makes a ton of sense. I was kind of going to go the same route. You can take much more risk in a 12-teamer. Like you mentioned, the biggest factor is that fab is just there's always somebody or the next big thing's out there somewhere. Usually. And
it's kind of funny. Like I almost find the 12-team fab like maddening just because there's so many like good options out there. It takes that much longer to figure out what you want to do. At least in like a 15-teamer, there's, maybe 5 or 6 guys that you're comparing. And a 12-teamer for those last couple of roster spots each week, it's like 20, 30 guys that you're trying to go through. And at least just for me, like that takes a while for me to sift through, but
it's 100%. And like the only other difference I'd say is you can, if you want to be more aggressive in a certain category, like if you actually want to go starting pitcher early, it's so deep hitter wise on a 12-team league, you can actually do that and feel comfortable at the end. Yeah. I'd recommend loading up on closers. So like maybe get 3 guys instead of 2, because that counting stats, a lot of teams are going to get 3 and you're going to be behind in that stat. Stuff along those lines. But you can definitely take much more risk. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Joe G414, he says, do you have any favorite 4th, 5th, or even 6th starters for the year? Because I know we talk about all these top end guys, but are there any guys deep down that are standing out to you?
So we it's kind of interesting. I've been kind of consistent in this, but like we talked about the Braves kind of 5th starter now with Felix out. And I talked about just how, getting to 5 or 6 and getting that win is going to be so big. So even for like 4th or 5th starters, I'm looking at guys that can go deeper into games. One guy who I'm pretty in on is Tyler Mahle in Cincinnati. On the forecaster, we put an upside of him of a 3.60 ERA and 13 wins. Obviously, it gets chopped down in a 60 gamer, but really good velocity uptick in the second half from Tyler Mahle. The swinging strike rate went way up in the second half as well. And when you back that up with good control, a ground ball tilt, like all the pieces are there for Tyler Mahle to make a push if he can get in that Reds rotation and go 6 innings. So I like the skills there. Another guy, and also I think the Central's pretty sweet. Schedule came out today, and Cincinnati got a pretty good draw. So the Central schedules are pretty good for some of the better teams there. Another one out in Arizona, Alex Young, I kind of like, especially with Mike Leake opting out for the season. Alex Young was a guy who made on many bloom boards this past January, February, as having skills and going like outside the top 400. He's probably even deeper than that. So that's another name I would definitely target late in drafts.
Yeah, I like those for sure. Another guy I'm looking at is like Aaron Savali with the Indians.
Yep.
You mentioned the Central already. It's the same for the AL Central. They're outside of the Twins and maybe the occasional White Sox thumping. Things are pretty good over there too. So Savali is one I like, and that just loaded. Like somehow Cookie's going to pitch this year. Out of all the guys I wanted to sit out, I wanted him to sit out. But hey, more power to him. And then
if he's comfortable, that's great. And the other thing too, just with Savali, like the Cleveland as an organization tends to, I mean, they've got good starters, so it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, but they tend to be pretty traditional with their starting pitcher usage. And if Savali is effective, he's I think going to go kind of deep early in the season, and that's gold at his price. So I like that a lot.
Definitely there. And then something, keep an eye on the Rays, either Chirinos or Yarbrough. They're both projected 4th and 5th. Chirinos was stretched out last year. Yarbrough, they're still playing the game. We'll see how that goes. If one of them or both of them are there, I'm excited. And then the last one I'll mention, I'm making sure he's a 4th or 5th starter before I spout him off. But we talked about him with Justin Mason yesterday, and now he's the 2nd starter, so I won't go there. But Garrett Richards is too cheap right now. Throw that out there. Too cheap.
Well, it's all relative. I mean, yes. You can be the 2nd starter on Seattle and be the 5th starter in LA. So.
Yeah, I know how that feels being a Giants fan. It's cool.
Yes.
Phil Dussault, good old NFBC monster, Phil Dussault. He asks, at what point in a draft would you start focusing on players that have an easy schedule for the first few weeks of the season, expecting to drop them after those few weeks. Like, when we have a full season, it's like around round 20, hey, this guy has 3 games in Coors to start the year. Or this pitcher gets to face the Orioles, stuff along those lines. When do you shift it that direction compared to I'm building my team?
So just the fact that Phil even asked that question tells us he's a pretty damn good player, because he's thinking essentially like 2 steps ahead of everybody. And it makes sense to really look at the schedule and probably take, I said before, I kind of like to use my last 2 spots and churn my 2 hitter spots and churn those guys essentially week to week. So if you bring that out to a draft, you're probably looking probably 20th round is when I would start using schedule as a driving factor. And I say that because the strength is, we were just talking about like Cleveland. I think that's almost like a tiebreaker when you're looking at kind of season long evaluation of a pitcher or hitter. But when you get that late to drafts, especially like in a short season, I'm not really stashing guys. I'm not really looking for guys with this super, super high ceiling but low floor. Yes, you can just cut them, but every bench roster spot's going to be so important, and to avoid those zeros, you got to start playing the schedule even more so this season. So I'd say around 20th round, and definitely start looking at those schedules and see who Baltimore's playing, see who Seattle's playing. I think Colorado starts with like 4 or 5 road games. I don't think they start at Coors. So, but again, in a lot of these leagues, you're playing 1 week ahead. So maybe you grab a late Rockies guy and go from there. So it's interesting. But yeah, the fact that Phil asked that knows he's ahead of the game.
Yep, he's always ahead of the game. I haven't looked too deep into the schedule just yet, but I know Nick Pollock, he tweeted out when it came out, being the pitcher that he is, like Nate Eovaldi, Martin Perez open up against Baltimore. Jake Arrieta, Zach Eflin, or whoever's in the Phillies rotation opens up against Miami. We mentioned Savali and Plesac. They're against the Tigers. So there's some matchups that just stand out. Like, yeah, we gotta make this happen type thing.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Last question of the show. David Mendelson asks, what are the values of middle relief guys that can pitch multiple innings? Guys like Freddie Peralta, Yarborough, Yusmero Petit, there's Lugos, all those guys. Are you a believer in targeting these guys and building with them with this goofiness, or how do you look at it?
It's tough for me. So most seasons, no, I'm not a believer in the middle reliever, just because and some of these guys are exceptions. Like you mentioned, a Petit who's been really good for a long time, but it's just so volatile. I mean, the just relievers in general, somebody who was really good and showed legitimate skills last year, like the skills could fully back it up, but you're looking at like a 50, 60 inning sample, and it's just not enough to be able to be confident in a lot of these middle relievers going forward. So what happens a lot of times is you take a middle reliever who had great numbers last year, had great skills last year, and it just kind of doesn't work out, and you really get burned. That said, for a shorter season, I think you're going to see and I've called Jesus Luzardo, I've called him kind of a glorified middle reliever. I think you're going to see a lot of starting pitchers with low win totals, low strikeout totals, because they're not going deep into games early in the season, that even if they do get great ratios, like the gap in the volume between that starter and the middle reliever is almost gone. So you're not getting the kind of the volume boost from good ratios from a starter that you would normally get in a 162 game season. And that value's got to go somewhere. So if you can target the middle relievers, and again, it's always my favorite strategy is pick the right players, but if you can get the right middle reliever who's going to consistently throw an inning or 2 at a time, maybe a couple of days a week, like that volume is not much far off from a starter who's being held back early in the season. And just by pitching in the middle or later in a game, you're just more apt to get wins that way, especially with the extra inning rule as well. Wins are gonna be settled earlier in extra innings, so you're gonna see I think some relievers get an extra vulture win or 2 out of that deal. So I think just to kind of wrap that up, I think they're more valuable middle relievers in a 60 gamer than they would be in a 162, but it's still such a volatile thing that I don't really have confidence in a lot of middle relievers. Even like a Drew Pomeranz was, great last year, but how is that going to carry over into this season?
Yeah, Yancey Eaton, when he first jumped in the chat tonight, said Drew Pomeranz NL Cy Young. So that was perfect that you threw that out there. That's absolutely phenomenal.
Yancey, I'm crapping all over you tonight. Sorry, man.
But it's an interesting strategy because I've been on board with going heavy starting pitching early to get that confident base and stability. I see the angle there. I've also seen maybe getting one or two and then just loading up on the Lugos of the world and rolling the dice there because you can get the ratios. And I agree. I wouldn't be shocked this year if we see a reliever have lead the league in wins. It's something goofy like that.
Yeah, I tweeted this out the other day. It was just if you think about ramp up, the major league leader in wins might be 6 or 7. Even if that's not a middle reliever, you're going to have some middle relievers who get 3 or 4. And again, that difference in counting stats, that gap is not there. So that's a really good point. I think we will see some pretty crazy lines where a couple middle relievers get those vulture wins and they're in the top 10 in the league.
Yeah, if you go off of some of the projections on Fangraphs like ATC, Garrett Cole is projected to have the most wins with 6.
Yep.
So that pretty much tells you everything you need to know right there.
Exactly.
Fun
and
time.
you look at our HQ projections as well, and you run the numbers in a 15-team mixed league. Ray Murphy wrote a whole article on this. With wins being scrunched up like that, the starting pitcher value curve is very flat. There's just not too much of a difference between your top guy and your mid-tier guy. That said, I'll kind of drive this home. If you can find that starter who gets the wins early, who gets the 6 or 7 wins, that's going to give you such an advantage. Who is that? We'll find out.
Yeah, it's almost more so don't concentrate on the wins as much as hope, and you can never predict guys with good ratios because that one bad start just going to, like you said, going to crush you. So it's going to be a wild, but it's the same for the hitters. That's why I talk about balanced approach at the draft, because even a guy that gets you 4 or 5 steals, that adds up so fast on stuff like this. That there's going to be so many categories won and lost on the final day or two of the season. It's going to be wild this year.
Yep,
absolutely
it's going to be. I really hope we get that far.
Yes, I'm with you.
And yeah, it will absolutely be wild. I mean, you hear stories of seasons being decided on game 162 or 163 even, and there's going to be just some crazy finishes. I haven't checked the last day of the season if they're doing everyone playing at the same time again or not. I know they did that the last couple of years, but I didn't check for this year.
I didn't see the times, but usually that's what they do, so that'd be good as well.
Yeah. Good for the blood pressure.
Yes, be perfect. But that'll wrap us up for this week, Ryan. Once again, plug what you got going on, your Twitter, all that good stuff, because Baseball HQ is not stopping.
We're not stopping. So find me at RyanBHQ on Twitter. I'll post links to all my stuff from there, and you can find me on baseballhq.com.
Yep, go check it all out. And Ryan, always a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for joining me once again, and hopefully we get to talk some real baseball pretty soon.
Well, we will. Appreciate it, man.
All right. Everybody, this is Bench with Bubba, episode 301 with Ryan Bloomfield of Baseball HQ. Catch you guys later.